So the future of work and learning, adapting to accelerate success. And we have an amazing person here to speak to us on this particular subject. Ashley Emmanuel, Chief Operating Officer, co-founder, Semicolon. Ashley is co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of Semicolon, a company that is enabling Africa's digital transformation by building tech-focused talent and businesses. Ashley coordinates Semicolon's delivery of innovative solutions related to education, talent management, digital advisory, implementation services, and venture building. Ashley has more than 18 years of experience delivering and managing impact-focused work in locations worldwide. She started her career in management consulting with IBM Global Business Services. Before joining Semicolon, Ashley was Chief Executive Officer of EFINA, right? That's Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access, an organization that drives inclusive finance in Nigeria through research, advocacy, capacity building, and innovation. In this role, Ashley supervised leading research and engagement on financial sector innovation in Nigeria and oversaw the delivery of EFINA's Innovation Fund. Please make welcome, everyone, with a warm welcome, Ashley Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. Ola Jumoke. Oluwaseniola, right? God has done it with wealth? No? Okay, we'll talk about it after. Okay. All right, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. I think this is always a fun group of people, I think, the Learning and Development crew. You just heard my bio, so I will be very quick with my introductions. This was already mentioned. You can call me Ashley or Oluwakemi. That's my own Yoruba name. So what does Semicolon do? We drive digital transformation in Africa by building tech-focused talent in businesses. What does that mean? We train software engineers. We have a one-year program after which we actually guarantee employment. So we're trying to address the need that all employers have for good quality tech talent. But we also do corporate training in technology, innovation, and leadership. We have a team of engineers in-house that build technology, and we work with startups as well. So, to the topic that we're discussing today, future of work and learning. And I've decided to go a little bit big and sort of push the boundaries of our thinking on this slightly, so that I hopefully will take a little bit of a new angle and inspire some reflection. So if we're thinking about future of work and learning, then first we have to think about what's the context, what's the future, right? And we know that right now, globally, humanity is going through a few different significant changes. So each of these would be significant on their own, but they're happening at the same time. One is artificial intelligence and generative AI and so forth. So we also have more devices on our bodies, in our homes, in our appliances that are collecting data and using it in different ways. And we also have rapid evolution in terms of biotechnology as well. So we're actually going through a very rapid and intense transition. I just put up a quotation from a futurist named Amy Webb, who spoke about this as, because three things are converging, it's actually more than once in a generation, right? We're a generation that's going through a lot of change. And as professionals, that means that we're thinking about how to help our workforces and people navigate really kind of unprecedented change, which is a tall order for us. It can feel a little bit scary sometimes, right? But we're going to adopt the mindset, a growth mindset, and comfort with ambiguity, and lean into that a little bit. So we know we're going to have significant change to jobs, to workplaces, to industries, to entire economies, maybe the global world order, I don't know, right? So what does that mean for us? Like I said, this can feel kind of scary, but we want to resist the temptation to either just ignore it altogether because it's too much and it's too scary, or to become myopic, have tunnel vision, and just focus on only the immediate next step, because I just don't know what's happening in 10 years, in 5 years, in 1 year. So I'm going to focus on the KPIs I need to hit by the end of this month. I'm going to plan 3 more trainings and tick the box and not think about the rest. We want to try to avoid that and really push ourselves to adopt a growth mindset and think bigger picture. So let's look at this for a minute. What do we know in terms of context? We do know that the future global workforce is African. So by 2040, and by the way, if you didn't pick up from context, I live here, I work here, even though maybe you noticed I'm not originally Nigerian, but my husband is, and my children and family. So I'm including myself in this space. So by 2040, half of the world's working age population will be in Africa, right? Whether we realize it or not, the future workforce, global workforce, is actually the people that you are all influencing, right? We know that you can call soft skills, but we can also reframe this as durable skills. Those will continue to be important, and I'll talk more about that at the end. However, in Nigeria, in Africa, we've underinvested in human capital, right? So in Nigeria, we spend less as a portion of our budget on health and education than almost every other country in the world, including some of our neighboring countries in West Africa, who are not really wealthy countries, right? So all of us face that, right, in our workplaces because we're dealing with gaps in the talent. We know that we're also facing a lot of other challenges as businesses, right? Somebody was talking about cost as a challenge for L&D. And why is management stressed about investing in learning and development? Because we're stressed about everything, right? The diesel is going up, cost of payroll is going up, we can't even pay our people because GT Bank isn't working. It's just a very difficult, sorry GT Bank people, bienvenue. So we're also just in a very stressful context. So there's a lot of challenges, but also opportunities for everybody in this room to be leading our colleagues through this, right? So I want us to start to shift our mindsets a bit from a mindset of scarcity. Evidence has shown that people actually make worse decisions when they feel that they don't have resources. So if you put people into a lab and you tell them that they don't have enough money for something, and then you give them an experiment, they make bad decisions, worse decisions than if you tell them that they have more money. It's just human nature, right? Companies also do this. So when we feel that we are resource poor, when we're worried about which next one is going to japa, right? Who's going to be taken by my competition? How do I make them stay? Is something that we hear people ask, right? And the answer is you don't. What we want to do is shift to a mindset of abundance, right? Thinking more broadly, more strategically. How do we take this context, but maybe innovate around this task we have at hand and unlock new value? So I'm going to take a brief detour into starting with why. And this has a people management angle to it as well. So there was a time in the United States, some decades ago, 1960s I believe, that the President of the United States had told the American people the US was going to put a man on the moon. Right? No country before had put a person on the moon. This became a national commitment and sort of a key talking point for the president. So he went to go visit the agency responsible for that, NASA, and took his meetings and took pictures. And in between meetings, he's walking down the corridor and he passes a man who's carrying a broom, wearing a janitor's uniform. So this man is obviously a cleaner at NASA, right? And the president stops and greets him and says, "Hello, good afternoon. What do you do for NASA?" And the man replied, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon," right? So what does this tell us? In the context of learning and development, we can ask ourselves the same question. Why? Why are we doing this? Why are we working in this space? So if we come to that why, then we can think about how we want to work in our roles. What do we sometimes get wrong here? I like this comic. The person is saying, the good news is we're moving really fast, everybody claps. Someone says, what's the bad news? And she says, we're heading in the wrong direction. In learning and development, what mistake do we make in terms of that why? Oops, where's our why? The why and the what is sometimes our staff, and maybe even we ourselves, we jump into the what. So how often have you had an employee or a manager say, okay, there's an issue and we need to take this training, it's next month, right? They've jumped straight into the what. I'm always having to pull people back from, when you think about learning and development, don't just jump into picking a random training course and taking it, right? So some of our mistakes are focusing too much on that. Maybe we're delivering a lot of training, but we're not actually getting the return on investment that somebody spoke about, right? We're not actually achieving the objectives for the individuals or the companies. We know that, and I'm not sure if the evidence shows that it's exactly this ratio, but learning and development people will talk about this 70-20-10 rule, right? That although employees tend, and maybe your management as well, tend to think about training when they think about learning and development, that's only typically maybe 10%-ish of where learning and development and growth actually happens for employees. The majority of it is this on-the-job experience, right? As well as some other types of learning. So I want to double-click a little bit there. How can then we as learning and development professionals make sure that we're supporting these outcomes, this why, despite the fact that only 10% of learning is happening through training? So I want to talk about three things. One is our managers. What's their role? Second is our culture. And then third, just kind of innovating generally. And maybe how do we work together more as an industry, more effectively? The first one, repositioning managers as coaches. So we know that if 70%-ish of learning is happening through on-the-job experience, who assigns those tasks? Who's the person who's most often making those decisions? It's the manager, right? Who's the person who's most often reviewing work, giving feedback, giving guidance, structuring teams? It's the manager. So if we're thinking about learning and development for an organization, you'll really live or die based on the success, the degree to which your managers are skilled and positioned and capable and supported in carrying out this role of driving learning and development. Now, do your managers think of themselves that way? Right? It's a question for us to reflect on. Do they believe that they just have to set KPIs and then sit on the neck of their staff until the KPI is achieved? The other thing I'll note, just in terms of employee engagement, is research by Gallup, a company that does a lot of global research, including on human resources and people management, found that the manager accounts for 70% of the variance in team engagement. So your retention, your employee engagement, and so forth is also very strongly tied to the way your managers are working. I won't spend a lot of time on this. These resources are from a book called It's the Manager. Afterward, I can share a link for resources. But it's a very good book. I recommend reading it. I just wanted to highlight that they sort of looked at evidence and said there are 12 things that if employees say yes to these questions, they're very likely to be engaged in your organization. And the ones that I've circled in red, the manager in particular has a lot of influence over, right? So managers are critical. What do we want managers to do? So we want them to establish clear expectations We want them to continually coach. So here's our tie to learning and development and growth, and creating accountability. So how do we help our managers become better coaches? This is something that I'll encourage us to take home as a reflection question, right? Are our managers coaching? Are we even thinking about and measuring that? If we see some need for growth here, and I think most organizations do, right? Then how can we make that some of our learning and development objectives and position them to be better coaches? And we want to make sure that our policies, our procedures also support this, right? So the way that performance management, for example, the targets that we're setting have to align as well. I won't spend time on this, it comes from this same book. But for example, something we did at Semicolon was we adopted this model for performance reviews and just gave our managers this template. They weren't bound to it, but it was a guide to support them in shifting to a coaching conversation. And the first question they asked staff is, what's your purpose? Not your goal as an employee here, your purpose as a human being in life, right? Some young people can answer that better than others, but just we're connecting to the person as a whole, and then starting to understand your development, among other things. So we talked about managers. The second thing I want to talk about is culture. I'm going to give an example. There was an engineer who held a competition. He gave teams of 4 people these things: spaghetti uncooked, tape, 1 yard of string, and a marshmallow. And their whole goal was to build a tower that was as tall as possible. The only rule is that the marshmallow has to be on top, right? What he found is that there was a pattern. Certain kinds of teams, and this is a demographic trait, certain kinds of teams that I'll call category A, built much taller towers than other types of people who fell into category B. Can anybody guess what might be the difference between category A and category B? You can shout it out. Sorry? Okay, strategy, the degree to which they strategized. One more. Teamwork, mindsets. So it was related to the teamwork and mindsets to some extent, but it was actually a demographic pattern that he observed, and that is that category A were 5-year-olds. And the people in category B were business school students. He repeated it with lawyers. Same thing. The professional adults always did significantly worse. And so, and especially in Nigeria, which is a high power distance culture, we have to think deliberately about psychological safety, right? Who's heard this term before? Some of us. This basically means an environment without interpersonal fear. I'm not afraid if I ask a question that my boss is going to criticize me, or that somebody is going to look at me like I'm an idiot, or that they're going to question whether I should have been hired. I'm not afraid to raise a suggestion and somebody will say, that's ridiculous. Which school did you even go to? And you call yourself an accountant, right? So we want to, if we create psychological safety, a culture where people feel comfortable asking questions, people feel comfortable taking risk, we're going to get more innovation, but we're also going to get more growth and learning and development. It's very difficult for people to take the risks that are required for learning and development if they do not find themselves in that culture. So that's the second piece. I'll just give an example. Imagine that you're doing some work in China. You have a small percentage of your workforce that's fluent in Chinese, but you want maybe 30% to be fluent in Chinese by the end of next quarter, or pretty comfortable. That's a very fast goal, right? Now, I used to always think that some people are just inherently good at learning new languages, and they can pick them up fast. But some research found that actually the people who learn languages fast, what do? They just dive right in and speak the language and make as many mistakes as possible, as quickly as possible, and just look ridiculous, right? But they learn it a lot faster. And this comes from a book called Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. Very good book, by the way, for learning and development and kind of understanding that context. But But the point is that this applies to everything. If we want our people to be growing as quickly as possible, they need to be comfortable diving in. They need to be given stretch assignments, but they also need to be comfortable trying new things, making mistakes, supporting one another. All right, and then the last topic I wanted to touch on here is really expanding our thinking, right? So we said we're in a context of rapid change. So look, there are problems, there are challenges, but an opportunity to innovate. And here, I just want us to challenge ourselves a bit. So, for example, we may have seen this quote before, right? An employee says, what if we invest and people leave? They jakpa, they go to a competitor. The CEO says, what if we don't invest in them and they stay, right? What if even if they leave our organization, they can go to our partners. I know one fintech who invests a lot of money in running a training for software engineers. They don't mind if some of their engineers go to banks, because now that it's easier for them to partner with that bank, right? And they know that they can integrate their technology more seamlessly. So what I want us to think about is, sorry, I'm out of order on my animation. How might we, everybody in this room, work together to build this talent pool that we require? And remember, this is for us to use, but also this is the global talent pool that tech experts and Semicolon and others who do outsourcing will be outsourcing, and who might go to Canada or wherever, right? So I want us to just challenge us to think a little bit about this. How can we innovate? For example, do we want to come up with programs? We know, I mean, how many of you have had complaints that people come into your companies with degrees, with certifications, but they're not thinking, they're not solving problems? Has anybody experienced that or gotten that complaint from management, right? Very common. How many people have felt the pain that somebody has a certificate, but they can't communicate well? They don't have those soft skills or durable skills. There's conflict. They don't know how to work with people. They become team leads or managers. They don't know how to manage people, right? So you all are sort of, to some extent, you're creating Band-Aids and doing repair work for a system within your company, for a system that did not exist collectively. So I'm just going to throw out the prompt. Let's think about how can we do this more collectively, right? How do we work together as an industry? For Semicolon, we're trying to address that talent gap for software engineers, for example. Maybe we need more innovative programs like that. Maybe we need to relook at our institutions, universities. Maybe we need to be thinking about transforming learning and development starting from age 5. I don't know, right? Financing as well. So what we find in our space is that a lot of the quality of education before people come into the workforce is relatively low because the quality is reduced to the point of affordability. And we know the average person in Nigeria cannot spend a lot of money on education, or maybe even buy a laptop if they want to become a software engineer, right? For Semicolon, the way that we've innovated here is by giving student loans, because people can't afford to pay up front what it costs to give them a system and provide very good quality training. But if we guarantee a job, they can pay back after, right? So how can there be more innovation, maybe even around financial models or the ways that our companies are financing building these workforces? So last, I'll quickly touch on a few skills before I wrap up. I know, we know this, right? There's digital transformation. Digital transformation in all of our companies in our industry is going to rest on digital skills, digital literacy, entrepreneurship, innovation. This was mentioned in the presentation before tea break, that a significant portion of the workforce is going to need to be digitally reskilled. But there are different levels to this. So for us, we can think about, number one, just how do people work more efficiently with new tools, right? If you've ever, does anybody here love Microsoft Excel? Or Google Sheets or spreadsheets, right? Aha, fellow nerds, I'm here with you. So you know the pain you experience when you see somebody working in a tool like that and they're doing something manually that you know could just be done in 2 seconds by entering a formula, right? And so as more technology, and they're wasting a lot of time, they're not working efficiently. So as new tools emerge, and of course AI is one of them, or AI-powered tools, we have the opportunity to just help our people work more efficiently in terms of individual work, collaborative work as well. So that's a low-hanging fruit for us. Working strategically, right? We know the industries we're in are digitally transforming. Everybody needs at least some understanding of the digital transformation that's taking place in the sector, or most of your staff do, in order to understand how it impacts your strategies. So that's the second. Innovation, so some of your people will actually then be leading that digital transformation or using emerging technology, digital tools, to create new products and services. So there we need the skills in terms of the technology, but also deep skills around design thinking or human-centric design, which is something we're very passionate about at Semicolon. Just the process for innovation. And innovation is a set of, there are methods and tools, there's also skills that can be taught in that regard. And then, of course, everybody needs to manage new risks that emerge with new technology. Decades ago, you didn't have to worry about somebody hacking your grandmother's WhatsApp, right? but now we have to worry about that thing. I will say that outside of digital skills, there are key competencies that all roles require and will continue to require. And this starts with our intern, right? Building relationships, developing people, critical thinking, communication, even creating accountability for all of our staff. And then the last thing I will say is, so I had a conversation on Tuesday with some people who are in the talent development and outsourcing space. We're thinking about kind of what's happening in Nigeria and what the possibilities are. And we were talking about the fact that I don't like the term soft skills because number one, it just sounds like it's not as sexy as hard skills, right? But number two, a lot of people say soft skills as an umbrella and then they never define what the actual, and there are a lot of competencies contained therein, right? And somebody said that actually, you know, the framing of durable skills is sort of an evolving way to frame that concept, and I've jumped on board with this. So we can think about these durable skills. There's a lot of evidence for the importance of character for growth, for learning and development, right? Of course, growth mindset, critical thinking, etc. So what we're trying to do is unlock learning potential in our people, right? This kind of lifelong learning orientation and skills. So these are some of the frameworks that we can really focus on building that will carry, even though we don't know exactly what the composition of jobs will look like in our company in 10, 20 years, we can be fairly certain that this skill set and investing here will help carry those individuals and our companies through that transition. So I will wrap up there. I will say, happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. If you'd like to scan this, I can send you a few resources that I find useful related to this topic. And you're welcome to follow us on social media. For Semicolon, sometimes we do free kind of webinars or workshops related to different topics, including people management. In fact, Gabriel has spoken at one of them before. So you're welcome to follow us and then be notified of those as well. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.